Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Hi again, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another Q&A episode. This has been long in the making. I have been asked about doing another one of these for a while and finally had some time open up in our schedule and finally able to do it. So thank you for one, sending in the questions that you did, and two, thank you for being patient with me as we found some time to finally get these questions in. And luckily these questions, they're evergreen. So even though it took a few months, they're still relevant, even though we're getting to them now. So we're going to take some questions, give our insight, and give our answers to those questions, just like we did for the first two episodes. If you didn't listen to those, go listen to those now. And I am very happy to be joined by the same guest who joined me for the first two episodes of these Q&As that we did. So once again, I am joined by the head girls basketball coach at New Albany High School, teacher and alumni of Maryville University. Coach Shelby Gliebe is back with me. Thank you, Coach, for joining us again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. Love taking questions. And I'm actually going to surprise you, Coach, with a question that you weren't prepared for, but I don't know the answer for it. And I don't know if I ever asked you it specifically. Your number 13 when you played. What's the story behind that number?
It was actually, so my high school number was 31, pretty much just because that was the only number available as a freshman. So 31, I go on my visit to Maryville, and the coach, told me the person that previously wore the number 31, she had actually passed away in a car accident. So they retired her number. So then the only number available was 13, which, was fine because it was, 31 reverse. But now like 13 is my all-time favorite number. I'm obsessed with it. So.
Yes. So how does that obsession, what does that look like? Do you see the number 13 everywhere? Do you always pick 13 on something? Hit the roulette table and bet on 13? What?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, if anybody asks for a number, it's 13 always. So for some people it's unlucky. For me, it's, it's my favorite number. So
cool. All righty. That's the number. See, it's always interesting with like the jersey thing, because here, like in my school, it's like jersey numbers, they go by like size. So it's like single digits are like the smallest one, and then like the larges are like the bigger numbers. So even if like a girl who's like 5 foot is like, oh, I really want like number like 20 something, it's like, no, you don't want that. Right. That's like a large jersey. It'll be like a dress on you. So
right. I'm gonna shut this door really quick.
Cool. All right. So questions. Here we go. 6 questions in total that were sent in. Again, these are just our answers. Obviously, they're the right answers. No, I'm just kidding. There are thoughts and insights, but I'd obviously love to hear your guys's who listened, your comments and your thoughts on these questions. So please feel free to share them with us. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here with this first question and pull this one up here. Alrighty, so this question was sent in by a really good friend of mine, Tim Miller. He and a couple of his friends have a podcast. It's called the Team Bear Sports Podcast. It's on Spotify. They're all Chicago kids, so if you are into Chicago sports specifically, you'll really like it. But they get into a bunch of other stuff as well. And he sent in this question with a couple parts to it. First part: how do you get over mental fatigue of yourself and players? And what things do you try to implement with your players to get them in the right mindset after a long stretch of games, losses, etc.? So getting over that mental fatigue or getting your players in the right mindset after maybe they've been going through a rough stretch. Coach, I'm going to defer to you and I'll have you go ahead and get started with that first one.
All right. So probably the first thing that, as a high school coach, you have to remember that these are kids. For me, what I've noticed is like nothing excites them more than telling them that practice is canceled, or like, we're going to take a day off, or maybe instead of having practice, we, watch a movie or go get some ice cream or something. So really, and especially with me, like I've learned, over these years of coaching that for me, like sometimes I also just need to like take a step back and just decompress. Like I just need a little bit of time. So really probably the biggest thing is just giving them a day off or, doing something fun and just really keeping in mind that they are kids, especially depending on where you're coaching at, like our home lives are not the greatest. So, first and foremost, they are kids. As a coach, you should know your team. You should know, what's going to get them back on track, what's going to excite them, kind of get them out of their mental funk. So, I like to just do something, maybe get them donuts and we'll just eat breakfast together, just something random and not so much basketball.
Like literally the first 3 words I had written down as my response to this was take a break.
Yes.
Like, whoa, just relax.
Yes.
As you mentioned, like they're kids. And one of the things I remember vividly a couple of years ago, and this is when I was coaching freshmen, but I was talking to one of the senior players and we had an important game, and that's all relative, but an important game coming up. And, it mattered a lot to our coaching staff and everything. But the girl was like, Coach, like I have an AP test coming up this week. Like, basketball, whatever, like, like if, there's other things going on here, because they're kids, right? They got other stuff that they're doing. And so like take a break. And like you said, like bring in donuts, go watch a movie, go do something. And I think that it helps your players remember that you look at them as like people and they're not just like basketball players. Like, hey, like I actually enjoy being around you as a person, and like let's get together and like just go do something. Couple other things I thought of is, especially if like I feel like when there's mental fatigue, especially for like a long part of the season, there's probably also like physical fatigue as well. I know at my school, like our athletic trainer is like really big on like, hey, like I'll come in anytime you want if you want to just go over like do like yoga stuff or like stretching or just mindfulness stuff, like stuff like that I think might be super helpful to kind of help them refocus. And I know you've had experience with this just from previous conversations we've had, and I have too, is like if your team's like going through a stretch of like losses, I feel like try to focus on, where you can get victories, almost like redefine like what a victory is. I know that your players will probably like kind of pick up on what you're doing, but to me, it's like, okay, so in this game, we're not going to maybe necessarily focus on the scoreboard. I won't tell them that, but I won't be focusing on it. But maybe I'll just focus on, okay, did we get better shot selection, or did we have better ball movement than we did before? And then I think like really overemphasize those things as a coach, like, hey, look at all these things that we did well. Like I consider this to be a victory. Again, you kind of have to sell it to them, but I think that that's something that could work. And I've coached teams that have been like that, where I've had to kind of redefine victories. I know you had a rough season a while back, and I don't know if you kind of did something similar to that or not.
Yeah, you definitely you just have to, and you can compare like last game we had 5 offensive rebounds, but this game we had 12, just kind of pick and choose the positives that, that maybe then next game they'll focus on that and maybe not so much the scoreboard, like you said. So,
And the other thing that I thought that was kind of helpful is I feel like if you're struggling, like let's just say you're going for like this long stretch of whether it's like losses or just like hit kind of that skid, I like to evaluate like where our practices are at and maybe like focus more on like competition and like practice, and maybe they need to like compete more in practice, and like maybe they'll see like victories that way where like they can compete against each other, and then like you'll have like somebody who like wins in practice. I don't know if that makes sense at all, but there's ways to win, I guess, even if you're not winning the actual game, which no coach wants to hear, but you kind of have to do that if that's kind of the situation you're in, right?
Definitely.
So the other part to that was like mental fatigue of yourself. And I think my answer is kind of the same. I don't know if yours will be too, but it's kind of like just take a break. I don't know,
Yeah.
go do something else. Go, I don't know, do whatever it is you do. Watch Netflix, read a book, do something. But I think it's really easy to kind of spiral out of control as a coach mentally,
Mhm.
because I feel like if you're struggling, your tendency is to just like work harder and try to like beat the door down until like you get
Yep.
what you want. But I think that has the opposite effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a teacher and a coach, I think teachers are kind of just fatigued right now. Um, and then you add coaching on top of it too. So not only are you worried about your kids in your classroom, but then, also your kids on your team. So it's a lot, but I definitely say just take a break, take a walk, get out of, your little town, maybe go out into the woods or something where you're kind of disconnected and, just
Like
breathe a little bit.
I like that. Go literally get away, go out to the woods, go out somewhere. Yeah, like yeah, even like a day trip, like super
Yeah.
helpful. Like go somewhere if you can and just reset. You
Yeah.
realize I think what you said though, that's a good point, is like when you get to like coaching and you're in your school and you're in your district, you get into like your little bubble. And it's like
Mhm.
go out to a day trip a couple hours away and realize, oh yeah, the world's like a lot bigger of a place. Like
Yeah.
this is
Yes.
reframe things a little bit, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Cool. So, what do we have for question two? Oh, okay, cool. Perfect. This goes right with mental stuff. Alrighty. So, this question, what ways do you keep yourself mentally composed during a game? So that was a perfect segue back into mental health. So during a game itself, coach, what do you do to kind of keep yourself mentally focused and locked in?
Probably the biggest thing I don't like outwardly like talk to myself, but like I always have like a dialogue going on. So like if it's a tight game or something, I'm telling myself like, okay, you need to you need to stay calm because if your players see you flustered, then they're gonna get flustered and then this is just gonna spiral out of control. But I was, just from playing, I think too, like if you played, in high school, call it whatever level you played at, I think there comes like that type of mental, I guess, toughness where you're able to kind of keep yourself composed if you were that kind of player. And I was. But then also just, telling taking deep breaths, counting to 3 or 5 or whatever the time allows me to do. And then also, I think it's really important to have a coaching staff or, 1 or 2 people on your staff that can kind of rein you in a little bit.
Hmm.
Like my sister's on my staff and obviously knows me better than anybody on my staff, but it's we have an understanding, if she sees me kind of getting a little flustered or whatever, she's like, okay, you need to chill out for 2 seconds and then, get back into it. So I think it's important to have, that kind of support on your staff, but then also, have your own self-awareness of what is going to keep you kind of focused in the game and not get, you know, too tired or, whatever the case may be.
Well,
So,
that takes like a lot of um like preparation in the sense of like, so you had to have like kind of talked to your staff and like built that rapport and built that trust where they feel comfortable enough, like even being able to tell you that like, hey,
yeah.
like you got to like chill out. Like
Yeah.
was that like an easy process? Was that easy for them to sort of like feel like comfortable being able to do that to you?
Probably not at the beginning, but I think, at the more I tell them like, hey, even if I just, even if I give you a look or something, like it's really not me being mad. Like I need somebody to be able to be like, okay, take a breather or something. So yeah, I mean, obviously building relationships, building that rapport takes a little bit of time, but just having those conversations and opening up with your staff, even outside of basketball, I think kind of lends its hand to that type of rapport.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, no, that's great, and I think that it also empowers your staff to feel like they have some ownership of like what's going on and what's happening too. I
yeah,
think it's really easy like in a game for like your assistants or whatever to like not check out, but like know that like, okay, at the end of the day, I'm not going to really be doing that much here. But
yeah,
to like know that like, okay, I know that like my head coach like needs me if like this situation like happens, or if they're doing this, like, okay, I gotta like step in and fill this role, or kind of, you know, get them right on track sort of thing. Yeah. I had that too. Like, talk to your assistants, or like ask them, or like you just talked about, like build that situation in which they can tell you like, hey, you gotta like relax or like chill out, or whatever the case may be. The other thing I think comes with experience is really at a certain point with coaching, and I'm not there yet, and I don't know when I'll feel like I'm there yet, but at a certain point, you're almost going to get to the point where there's nothing you really haven't seen.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing at a certain point where you're going to be like completely thrown off by what somebody does, especially if you like scouted them or like know who's on that team. So I guess you have to think of like, what is throwing me off? If it's like, okay, well, they're pressing us really well, and you know, like, I'm getting all like flustered about that. It's like, okay, well, like, what do you have to do to break a press? You know, you have to just sort of like break it down into like that sort of thing. Like, what are they doing? What do I need to do? But I do think a lot of that comes from experience. The other thing I thought of was, I think one of the easiest ways to kind of get yourself back on track is to try and like take control of like what's happening in the game. Like I think that when I used to get like really overwhelmed, it was because other teams or other coaches were like doing stuff to me, and I was always just like reacting to it. Versus like, okay, well, if they're doing this to me, what can I like do like on the offensive? Maybe I need to like do more pressing. Maybe I need to run this different set. You know, you kind of have to take ownership, where you're not just like reacting to whatever it is they do and trying to survive, but like trying to impose something on them. I feel like kind of helps you almost like regain, I don't know if that power, I guess. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but that's how I thought of it.
Yeah. And I think, you know, just from like what you're saying and even what I said, the biggest thing to, you know, kind of stay composed, I feel like just a simple, I mean, not simple, but a way to nip it in the bud is just being prepared. And obviously you can't prepare for everything that's going to happen, but, you know, by scouting and by learning other things on your own, how other coaches handle different situations, you know, preparation, I think helps. I know that's what calms me, is just being prepared and organized and such. So yeah, preparing for, you know, the best that you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you prepare for, let's just say, and you know, like 80% of what the other team's going to do, I feel like that other 20% that gets thrown at you is a lot more manageable, because there's a lot less that you're like surprised by, versus like, oh, all of this is due to me. Well, all right, good luck. Have fun with that, you know, sort of thing. I feel like it would be really fun, coach, to see on the sidelines if you're talking to yourself. I'm gonna like curious, like what are all the thoughts? What are all the things that are like going on? Is your bench like wondering, like, what is coach saying? What is coach doing? What is she talking about?
Probably, which obviously made it easier with the mask because nobody could read my lips. So that was one good thing about a mask.
That's funny. You know, I was thinking about that. This kind of just popped in my head based on like what your answer was. I think it's also important that like you really kind of keep yourself as best you can, at least have like that sort of face of calmness on, because I think your bench needs to know that you feel like calm as well. I feel like if you're like, look like you're like really flustered, and you look like you're like really like annoyed or whatever the case may be, and then you like tell like a sub to go in, like if I was on the bench, I'd be like, uh-oh, I'm a little nervous now, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. So it just helps everybody. Last thing you want is like your coach all like upset and mad, and then it's like, all right, now it's your turn to go in. Hopefully you don't make me mad.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's funny. Okay, cool. So yeah, a lot of good mental health stuff. Okay, fun. Third one, basketball stuff, real basketball related. What is a hard skill for players to learn that most people wouldn't expect to be difficult? All right, I got two. And first one, I don't know if this is girls basketball specific, but I'm just going to say I'm always going to test your weekend, because I just don't see as much as I would hope of girls in particular who can go on their weekend. It I don't know if that is a skill as much, but I think it is, like being able to like finish with your other hand, even dribble or control the ball with your other hand.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of time, but I don't think it's as difficult as sometimes players make it. I think there's a mental block. And I also think for a lot of coaches, I think it's not something they like to spend time on because they feel that that time could be better spent on like other things. But I think that it has to be done, and the players have to commit to working on their offhand, or coaches maybe have to spend a little bit more time on it, even though I know I really wouldn't want to. But I know as a coach, that's going to be the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to say, all right, I'm just going to test your offhand, and I'm going to find out really quickly if you can dribble with it. So that was my first one. And again, maybe it's just a mental block where players are just like, can't get over that, like, I'm not as good with this hand, so I don't want to practice it sort of thing. The other one, I've seen it done really well, and I've also seen it done really poorly, is players like just using like a jump stop really well, and like being able to gather themselves in like, whether it's like a dribble drive situation or just attacking the basket, being able to land on 2 feet, whether it's, hitting a floater, whether it's, just being a good pivot and passing out. I've seen a lot of interesting jump stops, jump skids, or players not really like landing under control, or going off like 1 foot. And I don't know, it's something as simple as like a good solid just like jump stop, and then being under control and making your move from there. I don't know, maybe it's just in my area, but I feel like it's kind of hit or miss. So those are the 2 that jumped out to me right away.
Yeah, I like those. And kind of with the left hand thing, which I think it's something, if you have camps and stuff that end with your youth programs, that talk to your coaches about and be like, we need to implement that, we can big time. But one thing that I did when I was growing up to get better with my left hand was like, for like a week straight, I wouldn't write with my left hand because that would be bad, but like I would eat with my left hand, or, if you go to pick up a cup, you typically do it with your whatever hand you're strongest with. So I would always do it with my left. So for like a week or 2 straight, I would do everything aside from writing with my left hand, just to get comfortable with my left hand. And then, obviously practicing basketball too. But so, yeah, that's what I always tell my girls. Like, if you're not comfortable with it, do things with your left hand that you typically wouldn't do, and just get comfortable with it being of use. So,
yeah, I like that.
Yeah. But probably the biggest skill, and again, I don't know if it's a skill or not, would be talking during basketball.
That's a skill.
Yeah, because I tell my players all the time, like, if you can't talk, or if you're not going to talk on the floor, you're not going to play, because then you become a liability on the defensive end. As far as being a help side and letting your teammates know, that you're there for their help if they get beat, or calling out a screen and not letting your guard get her neck broke because she was blindsided. So yeah, talking is probably the biggest one, and it's super hard. I always ask the girls, like, I'm sure you guys get in trouble at school for talking during class, right? And they're like, yeah. Like, okay, so then what's the issue? So a lot of times it's just, they don't know what to say, or what to be saying in situations. But so that's, something we started at the beginning of summer, that, this is what you should be saying, or say something, just something, so that people can hear your voice. So.
Yeah, communication. Oh boy. Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. It was actually funny yesterday. I still play pickup basketball, and I got blindsided yesterday by a screen, and I can still feel it right here. And it was not called out, and I was not happy. Oh, that hit me, and I'm not the biggest person in the world, and it was somebody. It was like 6'4", like 220, just oof. And I was like, well. Really appreciate if you communicated that next time, but it's just so yes, communication. But what you said, I think, is absolutely true. Like, I feel like a lot of players don't know what they're communicating. I think one of the things to think about at the high school level is think about, as your players are coming into your program, like, what level of basketball were they playing at middle school, and like what was expected of them, like what's expected at their youth program. I know that some coaches do a fantastic job and really teach and talk a lot about communication and their players are really good at it. I also know some coaches who they'll have their players do man and there's no like communication that even takes place then, because like, oh, you just have your person and they don't think they have to communicate. It was never taught to them how to. Right. And maybe some of the coaches at younger levels, maybe they need to be like taught like, hey, this is what I need you to teach your players about communication. Maybe just some basic things that they can come into our program like already knowing. So I think it would just be really interesting to like wonder or just like think about, what do my players like already know about communication before they come in? Because sometimes I feel like as coaches, we have so much knowledge about the game and we know what it's supposed to look like as a finished product that maybe sometimes we forget what it's like for them to come in, and we have to like break it down, like you said, about here's what I need you to say, and this is when I need you to say it. And just like you would practice anything else, you almost have to dedicate time specifically just to practice communication.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a middle school open gym last week, so 5th through 8th graders could come. We had about 25 kids there, which was huge, so that was good. Nice. And we were doing 4-on-4 closeout or 4-on-4 shell, and it was silent. I mean, silent. So I had to stop it, and we went over talking for like 20 minutes because I was like, it almost makes me feel uncomfortable to be like in a silent gym. It was just the weirdest thing. But then, we talked about it, and the middle school coaches were there as well, so they could see as well like how important it is to talk. And I just think a gym sounds better when there's communication. So yeah.
Yeah, I always have said to my girls that a quiet gym is a losing gym, and I say that all the time.
Yeah.
And it is uncomfortable. It is really like, what is this? Like, what are we, what are we in church right now? I joke with that. My girls like, this isn't church. Like, can we talk a little here? That's funny. But yeah, you have to talk about communication. So yeah, I guess that would make sense that you would have to, but I would be very uncomfortable. I'm picturing that drill and just picturing how silent it is. And like,
it's like an awkward silence. Like I didn't really know what to do. It was weird. So I had to stop it because
I'm too uncomfortable right now. We can't go on.
Yes.
Well, I mean, and not only that, but it's like the drill isn't being done right. Like you can physically do it all correctly, but like you're not communicating, like you're not doing this right, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. That's like with Halloween approaching here, that's like worst nightmare here.
Yes.
Worse than any horror movie.
Yes.
All righty, that's funny. Okay, so question 4. Unfortunately, this does come up sometimes. What do you tell a player who is going into their senior year, but they haven't improved that much their first 3 years? Maybe they hit the wall, or maybe they didn't put enough time in. I don't know what the situation is, so we can take this question a few different ways. All righty, Coach, you ever had to have those conversations? What would you tell a player who's in that sort of boat?
So I think where you kind of have to start with the situation is figuring out or having a conversation with that kid and like asking, what are their expectations for the season? And if they come out and say, I just want to be a part of the team. It's my senior year. I'm just playing because of blah, blah, blah. Then I think you can have that honest conversation. Be like, yeah, that's great. Like, here's your role. This is what it's going to be. Obviously, if you have a senior that comes in and is like, well, I'm a senior, so I should be starting and blah, 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 then I think you just have to be honest with them and just say, okay, well, and I might have to have a conversation like that this season. I don't know. Our tryouts start the 18th. So depending on who comes out, I might be having this conversation, but just kind of making them, I guess, not me like blatantly telling them, but them kind of sitting back too and being like, okay, what was my role last year? What did I contribute? What did I do in the off season to get better? And I think they'll kind of figure it out on their own without you having to be the bad guy. But the biggest thing is just having the conversation, figuring out their expectations, and then kind of navigating that conversation from there. Because I think depending on what they say, will kind of determine what you can let them know, I guess.
Yeah. I think I agree 100%. I think as a coach, first off, you better know going in to that senior year, you better identify it. Like, not, you better have had those conversations with those players their like junior year,
Yeah.
because I feel like if they're at that junior year and they're kind of plateauing already, chances are, not everyone, but chances are a lot of them aren't going to make a huge leap their senior year unless they're
Yeah.
like super invested, in which case then that's different. But like, you kind of should already know by junior year and let them know at the end of the season. I know a lot of coaches do meetings with their players at the end of the
Yep.
year. And if I have a junior who's in that boat, I'm going to sit down with her and be like, look, like, unless this happens, I'm just letting you know, like, this is probably what next year will be. It could change, but I'm just letting you know now. I don't want there to be any surprises, and they shouldn't be surprised by it either. Honestly, they should kind of know where it is that they're at. I like what you mentioned about like their roles, like how do you see yourself, right? Like, what do you see for yourself this year? And one of the things that I know we've done with our seniors in particular, the ones who maybe won't start or won't get a lot of playing time, is flat out ask them at the end of tryouts, like, hey, like, what are you going to do if you don't end up playing that much this year? Is that going to be something that you're going to be upset about and you're going to complain to everybody about? Or are you going to have a really good attitude, work and be a leader and be a senior and, do all those other things? Like, just flat out ask them. They are going to kind of give you some wishy-washy answer. Like, look, like, if you're not on board, like, I won't take it personally, but like, I can't have you at the end of the game complaining and being upset or, doing all these other things to kind of muck everything up, especially if, you're a senior and I'm starting a sophomore. That sophomore will probably get really uncomfortable knowing that there's a senior girl who's like really upset at you, even if they're not directly at you, like you'll feel that they're upset at you, So the other thing is, to me, is hopefully your seniors, if they've been in your program for 4 years, I'd hope that they have like leadership qualities and other intangibles that you're going to emphasize and be like, you might not play a lot, but you know how to lead in all these other capacities and all these other ways. What's expected by being in this program. And I think that that's invaluable. I would hate to lose a girl their senior year after they've put in all this time in the program,
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other way I word it is I try to tell those players, like, look, like, I'm not punishing you. I'm just rewarding others who are at this, at, the level that they're at, sort of thing. Try to frame it positively. I don't know if it works, but I don't know if they think it's a bunch of BS. I have no idea, but at least that's what I try to word it that way.
Yeah, I had a junior last year that every once she would get in games, but there were a couple games where she wouldn't get in. She's probably like a 5'8", 5'9", post player, I guess. She wasn't very strong with the ball or anything, but our end of the season banquet, she got the mental attitude award because, she came in every single day, worked her butt off, was the first one cheering for her teammates in a game, even if she didn't get in, just always positive, no matter if she thought she should have been in a game or not. And, we made it clear with her, like, look, we appreciate you. We appreciate what you're doing, and we would, celebrate her at practices and stuff too. Like, Joy didn't get in the game last night and she might've thought she should have, but her role on the bench, like, helped our team. So just that kind of stuff. And, in the spring, summer, even into the preseason stuff, she hasn't missed a workout or a shootout or anything. And she's not 1,000 times better, but like, she will contribute this year and she won't score a lot of points, but she'll be able to catch the ball inside, let people collapse, and then kick to our shooters. So like, her role, from last year, and just kind of seeing her morph into this person that is actually going to, contribute. It may not be a lot. She'll grab a rebound here and there, but just to be able to have that inside out game now, because we didn't previously, that's huge. So I think
that's
kind of
awesome.
Celebrating those roles and those people, I think, is kind of like, oh, okay, they do see me, they see me working. So
That's really cool. No, that's
yeah,
awesome to hear. And you bring up something that I think is important to mention, and for coaches to keep in mind is if you have a player like that who's going to, like you said, like all like the workouts and like, you know, shootouts, all these other things, and they go to all of them and
mm,
they're still like plateaued. Like as a coach, you kind of have to think like, why is this happening? Like to me, like I have to think like, okay, why is this player at everything but like still like here,
yeah,
like and not doing this? Like again, it may be something completely on our end, but I can only control what I can control, and I have to think like in my mind, if a player comes to all of these things, I feel like either there has to be a role for them somewhere in the court, or I'm doing something wrong,
yeah,
that a player could go to all of these workouts and yet like still not be able to contribute on my team.
yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
so that's really cool that particular player, like they showed up to everything. And it's a really, I'm sure it's going to be a really good example for your program too. Like, hey, look at what this player did and committed to, and now look at like what they're going to get this coming year
Yeah,
because of that sort of thing. Like it's a great example to have.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Cool. All righty. Couple more questions here. So let's see what we got for this next one. Uh-oh, this is the one that gets you probably talking under your mask. This is the one that's getting you cursing. Not that we ever do that, of course, as coaches, but how do you, coach, how do you keep your team from making bad fouls? I feel like if we had the answer to this would be like the best insight ever. So, but what do you do to try and help keep your team from making cheap or bad fouls?
Uh, Probably the biggest thing. I mean, one or two a game might be inevitable. One a game is inevitable. Um, do they think it's a bad foul? Absolutely not. But I always try to make an example of it in practice. My girls, we have our transition defense is not great. So we've really been in the preseason and stuff. We've really been working on our transition defense, and our girls have a really bad habit of trying to go for the block, or trying to time it so then they kind of body up with the person as they're going up for a layup. And I just think those are bad fouls. Like, get in position, take a charge, or something. So I always just try to nip it in the bud in practice and make an example of, okay, you just committed that foul. And I just kind of try to paint the picture of what that is then going to happen in the game. Or you create that bad foul there at the end of the game, we might be down or something, and we need you to foul, and we need you on the court, and you
Mhm.
committed that stupid foul at the beginning of the game. So now, you have to foul at the end of the game, and that now you're out of the game because you fouled out. So just trying to paint like a bigger picture for them instead of being like right in that moment,
Yeah.
and just, they're kind of starting to see like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But really just talking about it in practice. If they do it in practice, correcting that behavior immediately, and don't let it kind of spiral from there. So
Yeah, you really do have to, again, it goes back to like teaching them. And I think
mhm,
the blocking thing is like super important, because that'll drive me crazy. And
I can't say
the way I've always thought about, especially on transition, is like if your player's trying to like go and like block the ball, the amount of timing that requires,
yeah,
and the fact that as an offensive player, right, like you have all of your momentum, plus you have all of these variety of ways that you're going to try to score, all these different ways that you can try and get around that, to either
mhm,
one, try to score, or two, create contact.
yeah,
And for that defensive player, they have to just be perfect.
yeah,
And as you probably will attest to, that does not happen very often,
yeah, not at
where they
all.
are perfect with their timing on a block. Yeah, no, that's one that exactly like you mentioned though, is you have to like break that down into like situational stuff about why that's a bad foul,
Mhm,
for sure. And to me, that's the other thing, is like they might not know what a bad foul is,
Yep.
teach them what that is when it's, all the way on the other end of the basket and they're frustrated because they missed a layup. And so they just foul somebody on
Yes.
when the other team gets a defensive rebound. And I think what you mentioned is a really, really good point and I know I've had conversations with players about this where they pick up that second foul. Now they're sitting next to me. And then you like literally have to tell them like, is this good? Is this what you wanted to be?
Yes.
Is this helpful that you're here right next to me? Because I'd rather have you out there sort of thing. So absolutely. And I think that if a player makes that like silly foul or whatever, don't be afraid to just pull them. Be like, look, like even if it's your first foul and it's 40 seconds in the game, like, no, we're not doing this. Like we talked about this and you might be my best player, but this isn't helping anyone. And if that's important to you as a coach, those fouls, not doing them, that's a real nice way to make a statement about it.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing for me, I'll let you speak if this is something that you notice, is I feel like at least on ball defense, I do not have players, and I've rarely ever had players who are like great at like stealing the ball. And I feel like anytime we try to like steal the ball or try to reach with your hands, one, somebody's going to blow by you, or two, you're just going to reach in and you're going to foul somebody. So I'm almost of the mind of just like, please don't ever really try to steal the ball on one-on-one, because the success rate on that is so low that usually we just create problems for ourselves. I don't know if that's an issue on where you're at, but here it's not pretty.
It definitely is. And I kind of am at the belief now where I tell my girls, like, if you are not 110% going to get the ball and shoot a wide open layup, do not go for the ball. I mean, a deflection is big, it messes up their offense a little bit. So I don't mind, like, if you get a hand on the pass or whatever, but if you're going for a steal and you have a 50-50 chance, the only reason you should be going after a ball is if you're going to go shoot a layup. And I still have some girls that will still go for it every once in a while, but they've pretty much gotten into a better habit of, okay, let me just disrupt their offense by getting a hand in the passing lane, not so much putting my entire defense out of position because I was going to go for a pass or go for a steal, or I just went with the wrong hand and bodied them. And now I have a stupid foul. So yeah.
and when you're first teaching it, even like trapping, I feel like players, if they're not used to it or they haven't really done a lot of it, especially like on a press, players will think that like on a trap, like it's their job to also like steal the ball as well. And then they'll like reach in, like you did a perfect trap and then you just reached in and then you fouled them. Like, what was that for? And I think a lot of players don't really realize that. And as coaches, we have to like teach, like, okay, we're trying to get deflections here. We're trying to get like a bad, rainbow pass that gets thrown. And that's where our turnover comes from. There's a lot of misconceptions that definitely come into play. But yeah, like you said, you have to explain it to them, like why it's a bad foul. And I think when you're doing your other drills or your other things in practice, if you see something that would have been a foul and puts your defense at a disadvantage, you can just stop it and tell them like, that is a foul, what you just did. And the players are like, no, I don't care what you said. No, I'm telling you, right? Like that's going to be a foul. I just know that it will be. So definitely explain it to your players. And even, in film, if you feel like you need to, and be like, do you understand like why this was called a foul? Do you understand what you did here in that situation? So the more you teach them, I think, and the more you stop to explain it to them, the more it helps. But then I also think, and you just kind of mentioned it too, like you almost have to have like these non-negotiables of like, look, if you do this, like you better be, like I said, getting a layup here, or you're just going to sit next to me sort of thing. And we're going to have a fun conversation about it again.
Yeah, exactly.
Because nothing makes a coach happier than having to explain things over and over again, right?
Oh gosh, pet peeve.
All righty, cool. So one last one here. This is more a very big picture question. So thinking back now versus where you were when you started, Coach, what do you know about coaching now that you wish you had known when you first started?
I guess I don't really know if it's something that I wish I knew. Obviously, like the biggest thing is probably like you always have to be, I guess, learning, and just kind of have to keep an open mind to the ever changing, rules and the style of play, and the types of kids you're going to get, and not be so, people will say like, do you have your offense and, your kids fit that, or do you fit your offense to your players? And I guess that's more for like college, because you can recruit the types of players you have come in, but that's just something that I think you have to be adaptable, and you always have to be learning. So, I knew you would have to be open-minded and, constantly reading and looking things up and learning and getting nuggets from this and that, but it's a lot, and there's so much out there. So, sometimes it's hard to kind of figure out, okay, is this of value to me in my program, versus am I just kind of creating busy work for myself or something like that? So yeah.
One of the responses I had to this question was the amount of like overload of information that existed about coaching.
Yes.
Is just how much stuff is out there, and how much of it you don't need to implement, or some of it you don't even need to know, but there's just going to be a lot thrown at you. And I think it's really easy to feel like you're inadequate as a coach, because like there's all this stuff and some of it might be new to you. You might like not really know a lot about it. And so I wish I had known, like, look, you're going to get all of this information. You're going to like go to these clinics. You're going to like hear all this stuff, and it's okay to like maybe use like 10% of it, or like just use like a small bit of it and just focus on what works for like you and your players, and worry about the rest later, versus like, oh, there's all these new concepts and all these new things. I got to implement all of this. Like,
let me do 1,000 drills that I just learned and practice it, when can I do this next? So
Absolutely. The other thing, and this goes with being a teacher as well, is like, you can't assume anything. And I wish somebody had told me that, because I started coaching middle school first, that like, all right, like Mike, your level of understanding of basketball, if you can't explain it effectively to like a 12-year-old, then you don't know it. Then you don't know it well enough. And so I think I wish I had known that, like, how important it is to know something at the level that your players can understand it. And if you played at a really high level and you have all of this like basketball IQ and you have all of this knowledge, that's wonderful. That's great. But if you can't explain it to that person on your team, then you don't know it well enough. And so work on, it's as much of, knowing basketball it is knowing how to tell your players what they need to know. And I think that that's like a really big distinction. I think it's really easy to get like frustrated sometimes because of how much you know and how much you think is like natural, but you forget that like, no, you had to be taught that, or somebody had to like teach that, to you along the way. You had to learn it along the way. You didn't just have this knowledge. Is something to keep in mind. And I mean, you can speak to this as, you played in college, and was that something you had to sort of like think about or adjust to, the fact that like you had all this knowledge and you had all of this experience, but now you had to sort of kind of take that and like reword it or explain it in a way that was like easy for like your players to understand?
When I worked at the Larry Hughes Basketball Academy in St. Louis, the head of skill development, Jason Wells, awesome guy. And he's a big purpose guy. Like, everybody has a purpose, phenomenal person. But anyways, he always talked about when we were, putting in a new drill or talking to the kids about doing this or that, like, you always have to be able to explain the why behind it, because like kids are always going to be like, why? Like, why do I need to know that? Why do I need to do this instead of that? And, even being able to explain that to your coaching staff too. So that's probably the biggest thing of, when you put in a new drill or you want to do something different on offense, like being able to explain the why behind it. And I'll stop a practice if we're doing something and, something happens and I'll be like, why did that happen? Or why are we doing this instead of that? So I think being able to ask that question, but then also explain it, I think it helps them, the kids, understand like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like, okay, she can explain why, or, that's why that happened. So I don't know, kids, they always just want to know why, like, even in the classroom, like, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Why do I have to do this? So being able to answer why, I think, has really helped me take what I know and learn and get it down to the level of where they can understand and comprehend what's going on.
Yeah. And with that, and I'm really glad you mentioned that, the why. If your players understand the why about something, whether it's a drill or even if it's like something that you're implementing on offense or defense, if they understand the why behind it, it's a lot easier for them to make adjustments in a game or see something and be able to react to it. Mm-hmm. I found that I've had situations with teams where players knew how to run like a system really well or knew how to run like a set really well, but they had no ability to deviate from that if something different happened because they didn't understand the why. They knew what they were supposed to do, like in terms of the movement or in terms of like an action, but there was no ability for them to like be creative at all because they didn't understand the why of what we were trying to do. And if they understand the why, then it's a lot easier for them to be like, oh, because, this is happening on the court. I know in the end, this is why I'm doing this. So maybe I got to like move over here. Maybe I got to like make this cut or do this particular motion because they understand like the end process of what they're trying to do.
Yeah, 1000%.
And that takes time and communicate and explain the why. And that'll be good. And I've had that really awkward moment where I've stopped my girls before and I've asked like, do you understand why we're doing this? And they just stare at me I'm like, oh, well,
okay.
I guess, I guess that's good.
And I think that, I think that once you're able to do that, or one, I think that kind of builds a relationship of like, okay, she's can ask me why, and I can say, I have no idea what she's talking about. And we're like, we're going to learn from it. Like, she's not just going to jump down my throat because I don't know this. So I think that opens up a line of communication that maybe you didn't have. But then also just basketball wise, like, I think it opens up a whole other level of understanding in basketball when they're able to, like you said, not be robots and deviate because they understand, what they need to do if something happens. So I think that kind of opens up a whole other arsenal of things that you're able to implement once you kind of open that up to them. So.
And as a coach, you have to be like, okay, well, this was on me. Yeah, I didn't explain this well. Like, there's two ways that can go, right? You can either get really frustrated at them because they didn't listen, or you can just think like, okay, well, maybe I didn't explain that great. Yeah, maybe I didn't explain this well. And if you know your players and you have a really good relationship with your players and you know that they do listen to you, you kind of have to then think, well, if I know they listen to me and I know they trust me and they don't get why we're doing this, it's kind of has to be on me at that point. Yeah. It's not like they're not focused or anything. It's just that I didn't explain this really well. And I've had that in the classroom and I taught something and thought they knew it. And then I get their results back and I'm like, well, nobody really understood that at all. So, and I can only control me, right? So if they didn't get it, I can control the way I present information. It's a lot harder for me to try and change the way that they learn something. I can just change the way I communicate. So
yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, thank you all for sending those questions in. Keep them coming and keep harassing me. And if you do so, I will make sure that we do another one of these down the line. But no, these are really good questions, really fun talking basketball, talking mental stuff. And hopefully some of this will help you guys out in the season. If it does, please make sure to let me know. And if you have any of your own answers to these questions, leave them in the comment section or tweet at us or Instagram us or whatever the right verb choice is, and just let us know what your insights are too. Coach Gliebe, thank you for joining us. I know your season starts really soon, so best of luck with tryouts and everything. Hopefully it's all safe, and we'll be in touch down the road and do another one of these.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All righty, guys. Thank you guys so much for listening. This was Q&A number 3 of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.